The neon signs of New Detroit's lower district flickered against the perpetual smog that hung over the city like a dirty blanket. Oliver Chen walked home from his third shift at the recycling plant, his boots scuffing against cracked pavement that hadn't been repaired since before the Galactic Council made first contact 20 years ago. He almost didn't see her. In the alley between the abandoned convenience store and the boarded-up casino, something moved. Oliver's hand instinctively went to the shock stick on his belt. You didn't survive long in the lower districts without being cautious. But when he approached, weapon raised, he froze. A girl sat slumped against a rusted street sign, her wrists bound with industrial cable ties. She couldn't have been more than 16 in human years, though her luminescent blue skin and the delicate crystalline structures that grew like horns from her temples marked her as distinctly non-human. Her clothes were torn, covered in dirt and what looked like engine grease. Above her head, someone had zip-tied a handwritten cardboard sign to the post, "Take her for a bottle of liquor." Oliver's stomach turned. He'd heard stories about this. Alien refugees, especially the young ones, being traded like commodities in the outer districts where council law enforcement rarely bothered to patrol. The Zerani, he recognized her species from the news broadcasts. Their homeworld had been consumed by a stellar collapse 3 years ago. The survivors had scattered across the galaxy, and not all of them had found welcoming havens. "Hey," Oliver said softly, crouching down but keeping his distance. "You okay?" The girl's eyes snapped open, brilliant gold irises that seemed to glow in the dim light. She flinched backward, and Oliver could see the fear etched into her alien features, translatable despite the differences in their biology. She said something in a language of melodic clicks and whistles that his universal translator couldn't parse. "Easy, easy." Oliver held up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." He looked around the empty alley. Whoever had left her here was long gone, probably passed out drunk somewhere with their payment. The thought made his blood boil. Oliver had never considered himself particularly heroic. He was just a guy trying to make rent in a city that had seen better days. But he couldn't walk away from this. He pulled out his multi-tool and carefully cut the cable ties. The girl rubbed her wrists, watching him with a mixture of caution and confusion. When he gestured toward the street, indicating she was free to go, she didn't move. She looked at the sign above her head, then back at him, and Oliver understood. She had nowhere to go. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "This is probably the stupidest thing I've ever done." He shrugged off his jacket and held it out to her. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, wrapping it around her thin shoulders. It swallowed her small frame. Oliver started walking toward his apartment, and after a few steps heard her footsteps following behind him. His apartment was a cramped studio on the 7th floor of a building that groaned in the wind. Oliver cleared some clothes off his only chair and gestured for her to sit. She perched on the edge, looking around at his modest living space with those luminous eyes. "I'm Oliver," he said, pointing to himself. "Oliver?" "Lena," she replied in a soft voice, the syllables clear despite her accent. She pointed to herself. "Lena." Over the following days, they developed a routine. Oliver would go to work, leaving Lena with access to his food synthesizer and his old tablet loaded with language programs. By the end of the first week, she could manage basic English. By the end of the second, they were having real conversations. He learned that she had been 12, not 16, when her world died. She'd been separated from her family during the evacuation, processed through 3 different refugee camps, and eventually ended up in New Detroit's lower district, where she'd been exploited by a gang running illegal labor operations. She'd tried to escape, and they'd left her in that alley as a message to other refugees. Oliver learned something else, too. Lena was brilliant. Despite everything she'd endured, despite having no formal education for 3 years, she absorbed information like a sponge. She fixed his malfunctioning air filtration unit using nothing but spare parts and intuition. She optimized his food synthesizer to produce 20% more nutrition from the same raw materials. She even hacked his building's power grid to reduce his utility costs. "Your species is remarkable," she told him one evening as they shared a meal of synthesized protein and vegetables. "You survive in conditions that would break most others. You adapt. You endure." Oliver laughed. "We're stubborn, I'll give you that. But we're also the newest species in the council. Everyone treats us like children." "Perhaps," Lena's crystalline structures caught the light as she tilted her head, "but children grow. And humanity. Humanity has something special." You found me in an alley, worth nothing more than cheap alcohol to those who left me there. You could have walked away. Any rational being would have. But you didn't. You brought me to your home, shared your food, asked nothing in return. I couldn't just leave you there. That's exactly my point, she smiled, an expression that looked surprisingly human despite her alien features. Most species in the galaxy have forgotten how to care for those who can offer them nothing. They've become transactional. But humans, you still have something we lost long ago, compassion that asks for nothing back. 3 months after finding Lena, Oliver came home to find his apartment transformed. She'd used her talents to secure freelance programming work through the extranet, earning enough to not only pay rent, but to furnish the apartment properly. 2 proper beds now occupied opposite corners. The walls were painted. Real food sat in a new refrigeration unit. I've been accepted to the Technical Institute, she announced, her gold eyes shining. Full scholarship. They saw my work on quantum encryption protocols. Oliver felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. That's amazing, Lena, really. I'm not leaving, she added quickly. This is home now, if you'll have me. Oliver thought about that night in the alley, about a sign that had valued a person's life at a bottle of liquor. He thought about how one small choice to not walk away had changed both their lives. Yeah, he said, and meant it. This is home. Years later, when Lena became the youngest being ever to present research at the Galactic Council's Scientific Summit, she would tell their story. She would speak about a species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and overly emotional. She would explain how a single human, who had every reason to be cynical and hardened by his circumstances, had chosen kindness instead. The galaxy would listen, and slowly they would begin to understand what made humanity truly special. Not their technology or their weapons or their rapid expansion across the stars, but their stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to stop caring about those who couldn't offer anything in return. In the lower districts of New Detroit, where Oliver still worked his shifts and came home to a now comfortable apartment, he would watch her speeches on the old tablet and shake his head. He'd never understood what the fuss was about. He'd just done what anyone should do, but that perhaps was the most human thing of all.